So I just finished my new device for M Sound Factory. It's called MSubLab. I just wanted to give you guys a quick tutorial of the basics just to get you started. So yeah, let's get started. So MSubLab is an instrument for M Sound Factory. It's intended for bass and 808 needs, but you can certainly use it for other types of bass. If you're looking for like a Moog style bass or a Reese style bass, you can definitely use it for that. And as I'm sure you'll notice as we go through this, it's inspired by FAW SubLab and a couple other 808 plugins, but mostly FAW SubLab. So let's start at the top. Up here you'll see the mixer section. You can mute each of the sound sources. So there's synth, sampler, and Xsub. You can also change the volume in relation to each other, which will definitely come in handy when you start using the Xsub portion, which we'll talk about later. Below that is this output section, which we'll talk about last. And so we have 3 tabs, and the first tab is the most important tab. This is where you will build up your sound. So this first block is the synth. So let me turn this down a little bit so I don't blow out your speakers. So this knob will let you go from exponential all the way to mess. So let's just go through them really quick. And I'll mute these. So as you see, there's a ton of different options that you can choose from. So, I mean, you can do a perfect, for instance, sine. The shape knob lets you choose between a bunch of different oscillator shapes. There's sine, there's square, triangle, saw, and then there's also the ability to kind of interpolate. I don't know if that's the right way to say that word, but that's how I'm gonna say it. Between the two. So you can do like a percentage of triangle and a percentage of sine, whatever really kind of suits your needs. The delay slider can be used as a sort of effect to kind of delay the synth in relation to the sampler or the sampler in relation to the synth. Or if the two sounds just aren't sitting well together, you can use the delay slider here to kind of make them sit well together. The octave and the tune knob are pretty self-explanatory. And it's the same thing, so you could just play lower on your keyboard, but if you want the synth to sound lower in relation to something else, you can use this to kind of set the octave that you want to be in. And the tune is in case, you know, you have a sample or something that's slightly off tune and you want the 808 to be able to kind of sit better within the song. The next section is the sampler section. It's a sampler and it's a synth. In synth mode, the sampler section uses the drum synthesizer 4NN as the sound source. Let me mute this and turn this on. And it's basically set up to create kick sounds. So if I play this really quick, you get a nice kick. You can use the sample knob. It synthesizes 2 kicks at any given time. You can use the sample knob to mix between the 2 separate kicks to kind of get a sound that you really like. The next knob is this impact knob, and it basically just drives the kick into a limiter to kind of give you that extra punch. And then the last knob is the smooth knob, and it basically smooths out the synthesizer waveform. So if it's something like a square, it'll round out the edges. If it's something like the noise shape, which is super jagged all the way through the waveform, it'll smooth that out to kind of give it a cleaner curve. So let me demonstrate this. This next section, you have a low cut and a high cut, so that you can kind of shape the kick into a sound that works best for you. Resonance. pitch shift, and once again we have a delay. So on the sampler, in addition to the synth sound source, is a sampler sound source. So with MSound Factory, there is a set of kicks that come within the sampler module, a default set of kicks that everybody should have once you install MSound Factory. So I basically allowed you to pick between the drum synthesizer for and in, or if you select this dot here that says sampler, you can use the built-in sampler. And instead of this letting you choose between the two synth kick sources, it allows you to pick between it's about 30 separate kicks. So if I turn this all the way to the left, we'll start on kick 1 and then we'll just make our way through. Unfortunately, I can't have it reflect the kick, but you can hear the kick as you scroll through. So we're going to scroll through and we're going to listen to the kicks, just to give you kind of idea of what's already there. Yeah, so that's basically it. All the rest of the features are the same. The impact still works as a limiter. The smooth still smooths out the signal, but instead of using the waveform, it uses the analog knob that's available on the bandpass. If you're not familiar with it, it just kind of helps give that analog sound to the sound source, and then everything else is exactly the same. So you're basically just choosing between, do you want to use the synthesizer or do you want to use the sampler? The cool thing about using the synthesizer, though, the difference between these two, is if you see this randomize button here, when you click this randomize button, the synthesizer will synthesize two fresh, brand new kicks, two completely different waveforms. So you can click this. Let's just, so we're on the synth sound source. I'm going to show you the initial kick sound. And then I'm going to hit randomize and I'm going to move back and forth between the two synthesized kicks, just so you can get an idea of what the randomize button does. So I hope that gives you an idea of kind of the power of the synth section. It's literally an endless, like, it's just endless kicks. So you could just keep pressing the randomize button until you settle on something that you really like. The sampler's great because if you're thinking about a specific kick and you know the starting place that you want to start, you can go into the sampler, find the kick that you're used to using, and basically start from there and just shape that kick. But if you want something new, the synth is great. Another great thing about the synth is if you use the key track, you can actually play the synthesized kick up and down the keyboard. So if you're looking for something like a very short 808, kind of those new age 808 type sounds, the short ones that you would hear on like the Baby tracks, Jetson Made It type tracks, but something even crazier, you can go ahead and literally synthesize new short 808 kick sounds. So if you get a chance, definitely check that out. Like I said, everything else is the same. Yeah. So the last section, but probably the most important section, is the X-Sub. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to open up a MIDI region here. This is something I wasn't aware about until I saw FAW SubLab, but it's kind of an ingenious little way to make sure that your bass always sounds really good on a subwoofer. It basically plays in pitch with whatever pitch the synth is playing, but it doesn't leave a very specific octave or frequency range. So no matter how high or how low you play the synthesizer, the X sub will stay in the sub frequency range. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to turn this to something that's a little bit easier to hear. I'm going to play the synth up the keyboard, and you can see it here. And as I go up the keyboard, you'll hear it get higher pitch. All the way up at C5, and it just continues to get higher pitch. With the X sub, so we're going to start at C2. No matter how high I go on the keyboard, it'll stay in the same frequency range. It'll be the correct pitch, but it won't go above the sub frequency range. So let me demonstrate this. So if you weren't able to hear that, which is really difficult to hear it, I can barely hear it on my headphones. But if you have a subwoofer, trust me, you definitely can hear that. It's really low, it's in the sub frequency range, and it always stays in that range. So it's just support, and it gives you a little bit of flexibility. So if you want, for instance, to have, not every shape is created equally, right? Not every synth shape. So if you have a more rounded shape, let's go to like something that's more of a sine, or let me go down an octave. A sine will create a lot of low frequency content. But if you start to move into something that's more of a triangle, a square, or one of these noise waves, there's a lot of high frequency content at the expense of the lower frequency content. So when you work with something like this, a great way to not have to be limited in how crazy the synth sound is to just have something that support it no matter what the top synth sounds like. So that's what the X sub does, and that's what it's there for. There's only a few settings. The harmonics slider basically allows you to add harmonics to the X sub. By default, the fundamental and the first two harmonics are fairly present, but anything above that isn't really. So the more that you turn the slider to the right, the more harmonics you'll get. And I hope you can hear this, but if you can't, put on some headphones or turn on a subwoofer, find a subwoofer, hop in the car. But yeah, so let's take a listen. And so it kind of shifts the whole spectrum towards those higher harmonics. Not too much to where it's not doing its job of sitting in the lower frequency range, but just enough to, allow you to shape it in a way that's useful for most people. And these two here, they're basically a EQ, but purely for the X sub. So the sub, this one here, will pull out mostly stuff that's in the really lower range of your subwoofer. So as I pull this down, you'll be able to hear that the very, very lowest part of the signal is being cut out. And a lot of times this helps with muddiness. If you don't really need all of that extra low end bass, you're probably going to EQ it out at the end anyway. You could just do that up front with this. So let's go ahead and listen. And then the one that's here, basically at about 65 hertz is where the split is right here. The remainder of the bass signal, so let's say you want all of the low end, but your top synth is already doing most of the work that you need, you can pull down this main bass section so that it's not interfering as much with the main synth. So let's listen to this. Yeah, so that's basically it on the sound tab. So I'm going to, just for demonstration's sake, I'm going to reset this. And basically when you put all of that together, you can make some crazy 808 sounds like this. Alright, so that's just going to be the intro video in the MSubLab. There's a ton of other stuff that I plan on talking about. There'll be a link to the KVR forum, so if you want to come over to the KVR forum, by the time you see this video, there should already be a discussion happening there, or at least I'm going to start a discussion. I don't know if anybody's actually going to be there. But yeah, like, I'm really excited about it. I have a whole bunch of other devices to come that are coming out soon. Some MXXX devices, some physically modeled things for M Sound Factory. I should have a video up going over the envelopes and the effects in the next week or so, and then I'll start doing quick tips on kind of the nuances of MSubLab. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you have fun with it. Yeah, this was cool. Make great music. Peace.